Добрый день, уважаемые коллеги.
Good afternoon, colleagues. I'm happy to welcome you and our panelists at today's session that will focus on the new cohort of the financial market participants, and these are platforms. I'd like to thank the audience and our wonderful speakers. So let us clarify who they are, how they operate, and what are their objectives. My name is Yekaterina Golub. I will be the moderator for today's session, and I represent the Forum Analytical Center. We also have Kirill Kosminsky from the Association of Investment Platform Operators, then Pavel Pras, Infinitum Asset Services, Yekaterina Frolovicheva, Optimising, and Olga Shishlyarnikova, Bank of Russia.
Коллеги, чтобы нам с вами максимально эффективно, быстро и качественно рассказать такой огромный объем новой информации,
there's definitely a lot of items outstanding, and I'd like to jump straight into the topic. Over the past 2 years, a new subsector in the financial market has emerged, and they deal with something completely unexpected, something we've never seen. They provide services that seem to be similar to what we used to do, but they are still very much unique. Investment platform operators, digital assets operators, etc. And first of all, I'd like to give the floor to Olga Shishlyarnikova to give us a broad overview. Thank you, colleagues. Indeed, we have 4 new types of activities. These are platform services operators. So we have financial platform, investment platform operators. Investment platform operators, these are crowdfunding platforms. They've been entered into our register. We have 41 operators. 3/4 of them are present in the market. We do see a lot of progress in this market. There's more clients that are onboarded, both in terms of investors and in terms of borrowers that use these platforms to raise funds. So what do they do? They help to provide loans. This is the most popular type of operations of these platforms. Sub-federal bonds are also issued there to raise funds. And the third option, which is not that popular, we have just one pilot transaction. These are digital rights placement. This seems to be a classic forum, but it's only emerging here in Russia, so we hope this debut will be successful going forward. And the next one, these are financial platform operators. There are 3 operators. That area has a lot of potential. There's significant demand from classic financial institutions towards these, including banks, brokerages, and insurance companies are also starting to show interest in it, and in investment funds too. We have modest results so far, but that's only because we are making our first steps, but that area, that venue is very promising. And the next one is digital financial assets and information system operators. So far, we don't have any entrants, but the central bank is working actively with the first potential entrants, and it's just a matter of weeks, I guess, before we get the first entrance on this registry. Thank you. As we can see, this new generation is not very extensive, but in terms of transactions, in terms of volume and trade, well, so far it's not that much, but it's been just 2 years. Even for investment platform operators, this is not a big term. The year one was the time to figure out what the regulation is, what the legislation is. Then the pandemic broke out, and that delayed the operations. So they only went into full swing in the second half of 2020. But again, these platforms raised billions, and there's a lot of future there. There are not that many customers, and there's still time to fine-tune, streamline all the processes, and mitigating the risks. Thank you, colleagues. Now, I'd like to ask Pavel. You represent the special depository. You're a classical, conventional participant of the financial market, but you also acquired a new function. You work as a marketplace. Could you please share your experience, why, and what are the prospects? Indeed, we launched this new project of a financial platform even before legislation was put in place and before the central bank's project. The first transaction was made in 2017. It's an end-to-end platform. You can buy or redeem or exchange units, investment funds. And in December 2018, that transaction was registered in the depository, in the national depository. That was a pilot project, and then we were placed on the register of platform operators. Well, it seems to be a long run, but as Olga said, it's not a big amount of time for new models. We are an open-end platform. We are a neutral infrastructure institution. And as part of the marketplace project by the central bank, this is exactly the rationale behind this. These operators need to be neutral. We need to provide a range of competitive products, offering them a choice, offering consumers a choice. Currently, we have 13 asset management companies, 48 unit investment funds, and it was initially an open platform. Going forward, would be able to achieve synergy thanks to the fact that we provide services and depository services too, and we're also a distribution function. We don't have this synergy so far, but again, it's the project itself, the marketplace platform. The project is neutral to us as an operator. There are 3 other platforms, and we provide transaction support. So this is why we are called an open-ended platform. According to our expansion plans, we do see demand from the market to distribute closed-end in unit investment funds, and we'll be part of that. And we're also looking at Russian ETFs. So that's a very interesting project. It could be incorporated in portfolios. What were the reasons initially, and why it's happening too slow? We are a transaction platform, and we rely on partnerships with other marketplaces. We don't have our own traffic. As for third-party companies, the big ecosystems around big banks, they cooperate in a closed loop, and aggregators don't treat it as the first priority compared with insurance products, for example. There's a lot of potential, but it's still going a little bit slow. Thank you. Yes, indeed, there's a lot of promise in that. Kirill, your sector, crowdfunding sector, as Olga said, this is the biggest one in terms of the number of participants. What's the current status? 41 companies, that's a very good speed in terms of implementing this business model.
Источников финансирования для предпринимателей посредством займов через инвестиционные платформы, которые измеряются триллионами, да, к сожалению, пока
cannot keep up with some of the other tools and products to raise money. So currently it's about 10 billion rubles. These are micro lending for entrepreneurs. But we're seeing a very good curve out there. The entrepreneurs need to be aware what are the fees, what are the terms. There's still some fear because it's a bit of unknown. That's why we need to do some outreach. And we can also hope to launch a new product, crowdfunding, as a pre-order. And it could be an addition to other types of lending. So people would just raise money at a platform for their projects. So it's a small accelerator. And once the startup is launched, they would then go to the banks for a loan. Usually banks require a collateral. So our operator is a very flexible tool. So on the one hand, we have the borrower or the entrepreneur, and on the other hand, you have the investor. So we'll definitely need to assess the ranking, the rating, and to see what the business is all about. So we need to strike some fine balance. And finally, I'd like to say that we do see a lot of interest to tokens. These are digital rights and digital assets. And the colleagues that deal with loans, they're actively expanding into the new areas and like to pilot run some of the products in the sandbox set up by the central bank. And the goal of the industry-specific associations and partially the regulator to make sure that these instruments are clear and safe and transparent. So, thank you. Is that a transparent tool for an average person? Well, they understand this is crowdfunding. Crowdfunding is a broad term. There are areas that needs to be regulated through specific legislation. But in terms of platforms, actually there is little awareness, and we need to do a lot of outreach, buying ETFs or opening a deposit or getting a loan. So financial literacy is not really on par at the moment. Thank you. We have another participant, Yekaterina Flavicheva. Could you please share your perspective? So currently we don't have any participants of the digital rights operator, but Optimize could become one. What is it all about? We are the greenest player of all the participants here. I mean, we are a freshman. So we'd like to get on the list of digital rights operators. So currently we are just a contender, an applicant, so to speak, a bidder. So we're doing a lot of teamwork, and we have to educate a lot. So currently, I don't deal with any digital instruments, but I just do a lot of clarification. Whoever I deal with, fine-tuning the processes, I have to do a lot of outreach. Just saying what are the benefits, what are the pros, what are the cons, why it should be appealing to investors and issuers, what is a difference to existing tool instruments, where the financial funds will be, and why I don't do cryptocurrency. So currently, we are in this operationalizing stage. We'd like to set the stage for future growth. We're working on products, on the design. We're working on the language of the rules together with the central bank. So we are trying to get a 360 degree of the products so that as we enter the market, we need to be transparent to our average investors. And according to the stats from May, currently, there are more than 10 million active investors on MOEX. That's quite impressive, and we hope it will grow, and they will use diversified products out there. This is why, if we become an operator, we would make sure that we have the technology that is appealing, and the safety. That will be another important factor. So we would give you a financial instrument. It's a token, basically. In order to buy it, you need to come to a special place. It's a digital place. So I'm trying to explain it to you in very simple terms. You need to register there. So you have a full profile as a citizen. Then you have to top up your digital wallet and then pick the instrument that you like. It seems to be simple, plain vanilla steps, but how do you do it? How do you explain it to average investors? That's the biggest challenge. Thank you. It's a completely new area, and we hope that our investors, who are very much advanced actually, would like to try it out and get a taste of the new financial instruments. Colleagues, we now move to an area which is of great concern to the regulator, not just to the regulator. Consumer and investor protection rights. There are new instruments, a lot of unknown things. To the newcomers or even those who have had some track record of trading on MOEX. How do we protect investors? Let's start with Kirill. He represents a sub-industry which has the biggest number. What are you doing in this area? How do you make sure this is safe and transparent? Unfortunately, we don't have the same numbers as MOEX. It's not 10 million. Currently, it's about 30,000 people who are either registered or in the wait-and-see mode, sitting on the fence. You threw in a nice twist in your question. Consumer and investor protection, that's a big concern for the regulator and the market participants themselves. Take investment platforms. They realize that once you have investors who are unaware or think that they invest in one thing and get quite a different thing, that could lead to turmoil. Many are not ready for defaults, and the management of the platforms need to do a lot of education. If you're not ready for defaults, this tool is not for you. So imagine if you invest in one stock.
Для инвестиционных платформ, в принципе, для платформ,
It would mean you don't have any diversification. So you need to be able to diversify a portfolio.
и здесь нужно
In our case, we have issuers and we have investors and we have borrowers who are entrepreneurs.
правила сформулированы в пользу
Sometimes the rules are drafted in favor of investors, but the borrowers are also afraid.
у меня там инвестор заберет
What happens if the investor grabs my collateral? So you just need to set out that balance, that equilibrium in the terms.
инвесторы забирали залоги. Тогда
The platform is not interested in investors getting hold of the collateral.
наверное,
This is why any platform needs to come up with their own
положений, которые
guidelines
защиту интересов всех
that
сторон.
would ensure the interests of both parties. And there are two more parties.
На других платформах это, наверное,
It could be
те, кто предоставляют
those who provide financial services on other platforms, the regulator that seeks to ensure the resiliency of the financial system in general, and we also need to make sure we don't have any regulatory arbitrage, so that current participants don't re-register as other platforms to create new risks. And third is the government itself, the state, because there is a broader goal of supporting entrepreneurs, providing affordable financial resources. So we need to provide incentives, tax breaks,
финансовых посредников. Это
financial intermediary regulation, which is convenient and comfortable for everyone. Thank you. This is a sensitive issue indeed. Since we are talking about retail investors, we need to remind ourselves of the huge number of those on MOEX. And I'd like to give the floor to the front row participant who's online with us, who represents MOEX, and I'd like to give the floor to him, Igor Alutin. I hope he can hear us, hope we can hear him. Igor Alutin, who's the managing director at MOEX. Igor, our topic today is platform business. You do have a platform. As a representative of MOEX, you are well aware of how we should protect investors who are interested and will be interested in new services, platform services. Over to you. What's your perspective? Yes, thank you. Good afternoon. Yes, I represent MOEX. Currently, the overall goal is to improve financial literacy. That was a goal that was set by the central bank. We have a dedicated training module called The Path of the Investor. We expect a total number of 15 million people on MOEX by the year end. These people need to know what kind of instruments they buy, and we need to educate them. We need to educate these individuals. We became the first operator of a financial platform. We launched the retail segment. We don't just design a platform that brings together the suppliers, the financial ministry, banks, but also the aggregators. We have our own marketplace, finservices.ru, and clients can come and buy any new product, and we'll be able to train them, to educate them, so that investors know what kind of instruments they buy.
Well, we are a remote platform. We are not inventing any financial instruments of our own. We are only selling those products that we are distributing. We have more than 10 banks on board. By the end of the year, we're going to onboard 10 more, and including insurance companies as well. And we are already effecting about 50,000 transactions per month. It's important for us to do some risk profiling of the client and to show to the client what he or she can do. If you're talking about saving, then for some conservative clients, it would be a deposit. But when a client is ready for a more complex product, we will be sending that client to the broker. But in the process, we are going to educate that client. And this is the essential part of our presence in the market. Thank you. Indeed, this is quite interesting. Your educating mission and your assistance to the investing client would produce some good outcome, and we would see, hopefully, a very good story of investing. Yuri, what would you think? Well, we are operating in some traditional financial products, and I think that the Bank of Russia in recent years has done a lot in terms of protecting the rights of consumers. And this is efforts to stop any bad faith transactions, risk profiling, etc., etc. So in principle, in this area, we have done a lot already, so that investors' rights are protected. It does not mean that platforms like ours shouldn't do anything else. We need to support such initiatives and such efforts. We need also to take part in communications. Much depends on communication and transparency to the consumers, and providing information to the consumers about a product, about the suppliers and sellers of such products. Looking forward, maybe this is not direct, but we need to be talking about some good characteristics and elements of products when we offer a choice, not like slavery and being hooked onto one single product, but we need to provide a range of those. There is also something indirect from the participants to ensure continuity and the reliability of operational services. It is no wonder that the operators of such platforms have very high standards of cybersecurity and reliability of their platforms. A combination of such measures is something that in the domain of investment into financial products would be very essential, and probably looking forward, we can expect even better protection of the rights of consumers. Ekaterina, you don't have any investors yet, but this is something that you are contemplating, I believe. Why your platform is going to be better than others? Here, I would probably be talking about some architecture. We, as a regulated entity, have some mandatory functions that, to me, would be also characteristics of a high risk culture. The thing is that we do now have functions that many people would not really think about too much. We have a directive for financial monitoring, we have a risk director, and we also have an operational director. And these are the three pillars of a high-level culture of risk management. And the way our technological platform is evolving, it is based on some principles of security, reliability, and these are also quite important. And third, I'm talking about operational processes, how we present and offer instruments to the investors. We do have a policy of dividing investors into qualified and non-qualified, and this is one of the first documents that was actually approved and agreed upon even before we entered the market. And also, what is important is to have information, because even when you provide some premium services to clients, but when they are working with you remotely. We need to provide them with all information about risks, and we need to provide the description of the issue of financial instruments. And while developing an instrument, we're not really let it go freely and self-flowing. It's like the issuer and the client would agree on something between themselves, because this is going to be sort of like a creative chaos. And I'm in favor of a systemic approach. So in this whole system of relations, we are like the verifier of sorts, and we certify, and hence those operational functions are there with us. Internal control, operational risks, operational processes, and risk management. And this is where I see the possibility of protecting the rights of clients. We are quite a responsible player. And on top of that, there's also the question of penetration of such information, accessible information, which can be easily comprehended. I'm more or less taking records of those good artifacts, but I'm thinking about how to apply those practices of infographics to, convey some message. You come in, you see those infographics, and then you sign a document. So that this should be quite a normal standard feature of our work. This is the main element of development of such players and ecosystems of such players. We did not really plan to have a presentation from Olga Yurievna, but maybe we have a question to the regulator. We are being asked, Alexander Detkov is asking this question. What would be the liabilities on a deposit which was mobilized through a platform when a license is revoked? So what would happen to the participants in the platform? Well, when a platform is revoked its license, this would not mean that this is the end of the commitments and liabilities to the investor. There might be some challenges that the law now ensures that liabilities will have to be carried out through the platform and its accounts, but with the cease of operations by the operator of a platform, there might be some delays. We are actually now fine-tuning the process so that it will not affect the investors, but investors will keep all their rights and liabilities, but their liabilities would then be done in a classical mode. And I can see that the regulator is still watching closely what would happen to their platforms. Indeed, we have our hand on that, and thank God we have not had such incidents so far. Well, I understand that the regulator, the participants in the platforms and members of the platforms actually thought ahead of time as to what might happen in the case of a default. And colleagues, what happens next? Indeed, the sector is only mushrooming. The laws are quite fresh, and your operations only started. But there are also challenges, and we really want to look forward to see what would be the tasks and challenges and the needed changes in regulation that you see, although that regulation is quite new as well. Ekaterina, perhaps I'll start with you because you have the one of the most updated views of what may expect us in the future. Indeed, this makes me to mobilize myself because indeed, while we were preparing for our launch, we actually were also thinking about how our products are going to be launched, several of those. And as part of such preparation, we more or less also started to analyze the setup of the tax landscape so that it might not really incentivize the behavior of people at the platform or through the platform. I'm talking about the application of VAT to transactions, or maybe also the CIT that might be imposed on the life cycle of those products. In this regard, we do hope very much that there would be some fruitful effort by the legislators, and at the International Economic Forum, the legislators claim that we will be having some amendments to the tax code this coming fall, which would be comfortable for the expansion of such players as ours. This would also be possible and beneficial for crowdfunding. I think that this might be quite useful for the development of our platforms. My second story, and I see this as very important in terms of investor rights protection, this is the requirements for security, for cybersecurity to such players as us. Since we don't have any reference or benchmarking or models there that you can use, it would be nice to develop such an approach to think about the applicability of cybersecurity requirements. But such requirements should be introduced in a phased way so that it would be commensurate to the number of users. Well, I mean, we only have like 3 users, for example. You are just a week young, and you still have to really meet all those tight cybersecurity requirements. And third point is very close to me. We are a non-credit financial institution. So to us, it would be important to think about how to mobilize clients and how to identify ourselves. The verified records, the identification, or any other forms of identification, including biometric, would be quite important and handy to such players as ourselves. This would make us quite easy to access and understandable. So an entry in the Gosuslugi portal would be of much help to us. For example, people who actually had their vaccination, they have a record in the Gosuslugi personal office, and we would love to have the same in relation to us. Well, thank you very much. Kirill, before giving you the floor, let me read a question from the audience. The volume of lending through investment platforms is still very low compared to other forms and ways of investment. How can we increase the confidence of investors and consolidate interest in such platforms? It's not really about confidence, it's about having some informed decision. We are talking about some dozens of thousands of registered users. So people perhaps know about ourselves, but they may not be always confident in us. Well, maybe they are not really drawn by the rate, or maybe they are not carried away with the rate that is several times higher than the rate, interest rate on the deposit. People may not be trusting that. People are apprehensive that something may happen to the platform. And indeed, we heard here that there will be some measures taken so that the users who are not confident enough in us would hear that if something happens, there will be a mechanism that would not stop any payments on loans. Although that was the story even in the past. If a bank was revoked its license, nothing really happened to the deposits of the depositors. So it's not about trust. Of course, there is such a question, but it's a question of communication. And infographics is actually an ideal way of communicating to the clients. And this is something that we need to use more often and broader, because we need to describe our instruments. There are secure loans, there are short-term loans that you take to, for example, meet any public procurement orders, which actually envisage a very short delivery times, but then you'd have some unknown corporation, and you need to be looking for information about such companies, maybe in some registers, etc. On a regulatory basis, we need perhaps to subsidize the effort of SMEs to get their ratings or to get their assessment. We do have a lot of big data through cash registers, through cards, because there's a lot of payments being done through the online platforms, but we can use those assessments and estimates to see what would be the probability of something happening to the loan, of what is exactly is going to happen to it. I would support Ekaterina in that we need to have some pro rata regulation. If you're talking about some small volumes with several thousand of clients, perhaps we need somehow to phase out the or phase in the requirements for such platforms. But how to really implement this in practice, this is the question to the regulator. So we also had, they're still carrying out this tax guillotine in a number of sectors, but the question of taxes is very important. Through investment accounts, I understand that they are trying to lift any privileges and concessions on the investment into foreign stock. Maybe those can be rather replaced with the incentives offered for the investments into Russian platforms, which is actually more relevant to Russian entrepreneurs. Quite recently in the Sverdlovsk region, we had an expert roundtable on investment platforms, with a very interesting model being used there when the Entrepreneurial Support Fund was a co-founder of an investment platform. There was an interesting point there that investors were saying that through the platform which was established, we do not know those borrowers whether they are good or not, whether they are good faith or not. And say we would have invested into a support fund, then we would have more trust there, and then you would be managing the portfolio. Of course, this fits not too well with the existing architecture, but how to do that, we may give it another thought. It would be a good impetus and a push to the investment of money that people actually invest in the stock market with its inherent risks, and such investment, such money can be diversified and sent into this investment mechanism. And another question, can individuals be able to invest into the venture mechanisms using the platforms? Yes, there is already such a platform available, one, and there will be others. What is a venture investment? Small and medium-sized companies may be floating their stock to mobilize investors. There is such a mechanism available under the Russian law, but the question is, the issue is about confidence and trust. So if a venture company wants to use the platform and its services, it is possible. Yes, of course. Pavel, in your opinion, what is needed and or not needed in regulation? You know, the law is quite young, but claiming that there is some critical barrier to the execution and exercise of that law, I think it's premature. Of course, there are some small wishes that still need to be met. For example, it would be good for us as the operator of the platform not to be an agent in the language of Federal Law 156, and because this imposes on us some unnecessary documentary requirements, etc. Every time you'll have to put this information into various documents, and this takes time. But anyways, this is not anything critical. We are working in the status where the operators, where we are the operator and the agent, but something really for discussion. Globally speaking, we are supportive of a number of proposals that are already available from the reports of the Bank of Russia. And all those seamless transitions and transfers, all of that plays into the hands of the platforms and their cross-integration. To us, another big wish or another big chunk of our efforts would be to implement all those requirements of informational reliability and cybersecurity. It takes a lot of effort and time, but this is something that is needed to be done, so nothing to comment there. We will be implementing those. What else? Well, our plans of integration with the other platforms, there's nothing on the way of doing that, but maybe in the future there will be questions about the interaction with the financial transaction operators as players in some configurations and setups, so we need to be also talking and discussing some tariffs and rates. Every product has its own margin in terms of commission fees, and of course sometimes it is not always too comfortable. This is now critical. I mean, we can agree on those tariffs, but something really to discuss. In terms of taxes, I think that everything is quite clear. Well, thank you very much. And in conclusion, indeed, time flies. But Olga, my final question is to you, which really relates back to some other questions that we still have from the audience. And the questions are about the risks of kind of like combining the roles of a platform and the role of a professional market player. Would there be a contradiction there? Perhaps, responding to the wishes of the participants in the market that were expressed here in the studios, we thought that the regulation that we established is very minimal today. And the representative of the classical market would confirm that classical institutions have a much higher regulatory burden, which we are trying to alleviate. And we thought that the burden on the platforms is much lower, but we heard that something may be improved. We will be looking into that, although indeed requirements are quite minimal. Maybe informational security is a point to discuss, whether we can use some pro rata regulation there. But what do we see in terms of future developments? We see that the platform, and this brings us back to the question of the way platforms operate, and they have very similar risks to the other mechanisms. But there are three laws, three bylaws, three regulations. Unfortunately, they not always have the same approach, and that is why it is difficult to combine the operational activity in other platforms and the classical business. There we see actually a good room for improvement. Historical experience shows that we had the same about exchanges. Our regulation was first about the type, it was based on the assessment of the type of activity, whether it was like a time market, etc. But then we decided that it should be quite universal. Then we would also be looking for some common traits of platforms and what can be made universal and unified in terms of our approaches to platforms, and combining this link with the operatorship business would probably improve. Another big area where we have good room for development. These are the rules of the operation of platforms. We don't have many rules right now, so the main focus now on regulation would be on the rules. It would be a rules-based regulation, and we hope that platforms, through their self-organization, would develop their standards. If they cannot do that, we would be helping them in terms of regulation, because this is the main mechanism of for onboarding investors. And also, if you remember a classical Soviet movie of Moscow Does Not Believe in Tears, where one of the characters said that TV will be replacing everything, theaters, ballets, etc. So TV will be everywhere. So maybe platforms would be that same TV, but in the future that it would replace everything. And maybe using such instruments, we would see in the marketplace from the other sectors like IT companies. Colleagues, thank you very much. It was a wonderful session. We heard so many new things, and I thank you all and goodbye.